Hello, everyone. Cultured Khun here. This is the penultimate video of the series, Consciousness, Part 4. And today we're going to talk about culture consciousness. Thus far, we've spoken class consciousness, color consciousness, and creed consciousness. And today I want to focus on amalgamating these topics. I want to talk about truth and truth value in society. And that brings me to culture. So I'm going to start by telling a little story. So I was recently involved in separating a fight between some young boys built like USB cables. But it's all good, it was over a girl, as per flipping usual. And so egos were flaring, testosterone was flying up. Nah, G, what, my boy, this, that. I was like, yeah, anyway, gentlemen. And so I understood, it came from a place of pain, supposedly for the purpose of pride. At least protecting the pride, protecting that injured ego. And, anger was inflamed, the environment was hot, it was hostile, and it was a hot kick, to be quite frank. And so as I was separating these boys, I was thinking to myself, wow, this was me. Because I've had my fair share of street fights, I don't want to take too much credit about being a street warrior or whatever, but I can handle myself. And thankfully, we praise God that I haven't been killed, stoned, or shot, because a lot of these things do happen out there, and I don't advise that we go out trying to prove ourselves as young men or women, because women also want to show us these days. But as I was talking to these guys, as I was watching them, as I was observing their emotions and watching them play out, I was thinking, there is something missing here. There's a disconnect. And I think perhaps the men in their lives haven't spoken to them about that emotional management or the emotional hijacking that's possible. Because I think something that boys do struggle with from an early age is violence. And it's because we express our emotions violently. I remember once speaking to a therapist, or was it a psychiatrist, and I mentioned to her how with young men there isn't a conversation about how the emotions for us are so visceral, and the only outlet that seems expressive in an appropriate form is violence. But oftentimes when you come in the middle of that violence and you cut through the tension and you try and hold the boy, or you look the boy in the eye and have them try to speak to you or mouth words to express how they're feeling, tears start to cry. And they start to follow, a stream down either side of their face. And one of the boys, I won't expose him, but he had a rough go of it, he had headbutt someone, ended up injuring himself. He had blood on his shirt. Ah, I love men, my God. So he had blood on his shirt, right? And I was engaging him, I went straight to him and I was looking at him. I said, okay, walk me through it. What you're feeling. Tell me what's wrong. What are you thinking about? He's like, no, man. So at the core of it, I think he was angry about other things, but he, as many men do, took that opportunity as an outlet to vent. And so he used the person he was hitting or being violent with as a modicum of expression of that anger, which he had deep-seated in his heart. And I think a lot of times when people get into street fights or encounters or arguments, it comes from a various place. I don't know whether you've ever poked someone, or you've provoked them, or you've teased them, or you've taunted them, and the response is quite vitriolic or violent, and you're like, whoa, dog, it's a small joke. But the truth is, we don't really know what people are going through. We don't really know what hate they're harboring. We don't really know that some people are on their last leg when it comes to being patient and tolerant of BS, to be quite frank. And so for these gentlemen, I'm pretty sure, they were high schoolers. And I understand being an angry kid. For me, my outlet a lot of the time was sport. And so I pushed hard, very hard in many endeavors in my life. With academics, I saw it as competitive. I saw academia as sport. And even with contact sports, I played football, basketball, rugby, swimming. But particularly with the rugby, I was always the kid who would get involved in the fights, who would hit a little harder than usual, who would hit high or hit low, who would dump kids, who would hit outside or throw someone off a rock. I was just that problem child on the pitch where, I get angry and punch in the field. The ref is telling me to cool off. The coaches and some of my teammates are like, couldn't chill out, whatever. But deep down, it was a release for me. It was cathartic because a lot of the conflict I was undergoing internally, I got to show externally. And I think it shows, because you see with a lot of athletes, people will get competitive or get really amped up or angsty about losing or winning or whatever. It's not that the loss is particularly important. It's about the remuneration of reward. It's about that external validation being stripped away from them, that opportunity to be a star in their own show, because a lot of people don't feel like a star. A lot of people instead feel like the night sky, watching the stars with the moon, and you feel like a background character in your own story. So I just wanted to start with that because I think we live in a society where a lot of people aren't telling the truth. And by telling the truth, I think a lot of people are equivocating. Sorry. We're equivocating and we're omitting parts of ourselves that we think would be inaccessible or at least unacceptable to certain people. Maybe it's people of hierarchy. Maybe it's people who have established the dominance change in our life. And I know for me, I've lied with my actions a lot of the time in life. And I think the intersection of truth is ideology in action. And whatever you do is affirmative of the ideas embedded in your head. And I have been impregnated with many ideas such as black excellence, such as high achievement, high rewards, high status. And, it's been bred in an environment where I've been surrounded with individuals who epitomize and exemplified some of these ideations. So for me, I can speak personally because it resonates deeply, the idea of truth and truth value and lying and omitting and equivocating for further pursuit in life, for progression along the social hierarchy. And, I've lied with being a good kid. I've lied with hiding my edge, lied with going to church, for example. Like, I know so many people who are just doing things, just conforming for the sake of peace at home. So many things with people just following instructions, who are losing autonomy just to please others. And you carry this into the boardroom. You carry this into the bedroom eventually if you get married, or at least if you start being sexually active. You carry this with your further relationships and orientation outwards, horizontally into the world. I think your relationship vertically, either with your higher self or a parent or an idea or whatever you hold highest in regard, deeply affects your momentum in the outside world. And for me, with the voices of reason and the hierarchies and chains of command in my life, I've definitely lied to please them. So, for example, getting good grades, for me, pushing myself to a point where I perform well, excellently, was oftentimes for praise and wasn't for the merit of the academics. Because, if you ask any high achieving kid, no one cares. No one really gives a fuck about the book, the writing, the reading, the examination. A lot of it is so you can be heaped on with high praises by your parents, grandparents, friends, or family. And then when that's taken away from you, when it's like, okay, I'm a good student, and then what? So even with your friends, you succumb to peer pressure. You're lying to yourself to appease them, And even when it comes to succumbing to parental pressure, when it comes to putting off your own things to prioritize their things, which may not be important to them, but they delegate them to you because they don't value your time. They don't value it as a resource. They don't value it as an asset. They don't value you or respect you in the regard that you wish to be seen. And this resonates deeply with me because I do speak from a place where I feel that I've lied to appease people. I've given myself ultimately as a sacrifice from which everyone is eaten and taken away what they please, what they choose. And if you can relate to that sentiment, then this video is for you. You know, having lived in this world for a short span of 21 years, you see a lot of things and you observe patterns of behavior across generations and even in different segments of society, whether it's class groups, school groups, church groups, religious groups, schools of thought. Like, you see the manifestations of these lies. And I think even the society we've built, you know, where we are unable, like with the previous example I mentioned, to engage in discourse with young boys about their emotions, to tell them the truth about the world, to tell them that there are many triggers and that you need to learn to hold yourself. You need to learn to tame the beast within. You need to learn to sometimes, unfortunately, shackle that wild and free spirit. You know, I feel like a caged animal most of the times. I feel like there's a constant attempt to tame me, constant attempt to constrain, to restrict, to contort me, and to castrate my character. But because my spirit is so big, because my heart is so dominant, because my brain is so big, I'm pushing against these systems because one, I am extremely cognizant, two, I'm acutely aware, and three, I'm highly sensitive to the forced imposition of these value systems and structures on my life. I think it's part of the reason why I struggle with authority. And it's because I think in my life, the figures of authority have exposed or explored tyranny. And for me, whenever I'm being told what to do or how to do something, or to submit or to obey, you know, that those words are accompanied with a caving in on my chest, like an unbearable, unpleasant pressure, which I can't seem to get over. I know maybe some ladies can relate to this, being told to obey or submit because someone is in better position to make decisions on your behalf than you, despite them not knowing shit about you. You know, or if it comes to dreams, someone who's never chased a dream telling you how not to follow your dream, even though doors are opening for you and they're encouraging you to close doors and go via the conventional pathways of prosperity to success. It's very unfortunate. And I also want to speak to the subcultures that have come from this cancerous culture. You know, we have cancel culture, but the reason why I say cancerous culture is because I believe that our wounds today are portals to our higher selves, to our higher being. They're portals to stages of healing we have not yet accessed. But that's only because we have not braved the fight to confront the truth of who we are. And in speaking with truth, I think that telling the truth in this day and age is one of the most difficult things to do. Now, I have never lied on my public platforms about anything, about my life story, about my lived experiences. And with that, I have received a certain backlash. And I'm sure with you guys, if you try to live a life where you tell the truth to absolutely everyone, you won't yield favorable results from absolutely everyone because, for one, what gives you the right to tell the truth? Who told you you shouldn't soothe my sadness, aid and assist me in deluding myself with some lies? And you see this spread across all domains of discussion. You know, if you view family as an institute, how many of us really talk about the traumas that are affecting us? Really talk about the traumas that are acting as tumors and feeding off our life essence? How many of us really talk to our friends truthfully about peer pressure? I didn't like it when you said that. I didn't like when we did this. I didn't like how you guys excluding me from this misbehavior makes me feel as less of a friend. How many of us truthfully talk about the futility of education, or at least the education system as presently constructed? Because education doesn't mean being in an institute. That's institutionalization. It's the same as being in prison. It's why you find children find being educated, being forced to follow a curriculum for a set number of years is the same as a prison sentence, because ultimately you are closed in by these core concepts and you're not allowed to explore your creativity, your curiosity, which built the same world which supposedly founded those concepts or those world of forms, quote unquote Plato. So I just want us to do a bit of thinking about that. I want us to do a bit of thinking about how much truth you're telling, and even I mentioned before subcultures. We have popularized picking at our heroes. We have popularized downplaying the dreamers. We have popularized shooting down others who are striving for success, striving for excellence in pathways which are unknown to ourselves. And I want to speak historically, at least in blocks. So there is this theory that with each generation, there are prophets, there are nomads, there are heroes, and there are artists. And so, speaking as a Black, as an African, as a Zambian, the prophets would have been KK's generation. And the nomads would have been the following generation, our grandparents. The heroes were meant to be our generation, well, our parents' generation, and the artists are our generation. So the prophets foresee change. The prophets foretold of great times to come. And the prophets, in large part, their job was to build information systems and education systems that were based on their foreseen future. The Martin Luther Kings of the world, I have a dream. The Kwame Nkrumahs, we will once be free. Nelson Mandela's, they will long walk to freedom. And the generation subsequent to that, the nomads, our grandparents, were people who moved into sectors of society that they had never previously occupied. I'll speak briefly about my grandparents. On my paternal side, both of my grandparents were born and raised in the village, and they had moved to the city. So it was that they were part of that urban rural migration. And with that, there was a lot of culture clashes, because the way society was formulated and operated in the village is very different from the cityscape. And so you cannot really bring the village to the city, nor can you take the city to the village. You have to become someone else. You have to become something new. And from that generation came my parents, who are meant to be the heroes. And these are our current politicians who are meant to fix things, fix the debt, fix education, fix information, fix remuneration, fix the money problem. And these are the people who are tasked, unfortunately, with solving the problems of the past, repairing relationships with the ether, repairing relationships with children, repairing institutes such as family, and building back trust in society and in people. Then you have our generation, which is the generation of artists. And typically an artist is someone who has a rich internal life and doesn't value too much of the externality of life. You have people who are awe-inspiring, people who are bringing about change with alternative media. So right now, commonly, there are podcasters, there are poets, there are philosophers. And similar to that of the prophet, we see the world as it should be, and we operate off a different line of imperatives. For us, our line of imperatives is freedom. And not only is freedom our drive, but it's quite literally the microcosm of our mind. Everything we do is based off freedom, based off redefinition, based off revolution, based off imagining the limits and lines of potentiality. And being an artist, in my generation. It's quite difficult because you are being imposed on by the heroes and being given these duties and being given these responsibilities to step into the role of inheriting these previous broken systems and trying to operate on them, as opposed to designing, reinvigorating, and implementing changes that would benefit society as a whole. And with my generation, you find that a lot of us don't want to tread the lines that our parents walked. A lot of us aren't service oriented. A lot of us don't want to go into institutions and work our life away for 30, 40 years to then maybe pay off a mortgage and then maybe have a few flats and then maybe have a small holding farm and then maybe try and travel and retire well and spend time with your grandchildren. A lot of us are seeking a richer relationship with life. A lot of us are seeking a broader bandwidth of perspective. A lot of us are seeking philosophies that ascertain higher levels of consciousness and awareness. And you see that across the board with our normative values. You see that with the way we treat culture, the way we treat family, the way we treat friends, the way we treat even mental health, which is a popular thing right now. Because we live here, many of us, and we're trying to bring this world out into the old world. But it's very difficult because weak systems defeat good men, good women, and there will never be enough artists to redefine a system. There will always have to be sacrificial lambs. There will always have to be lions who venture out from their pride and go to conquer these new lands. And so many of us are stuck. We're stuck at a crossroads where we can choose to follow the C-suite executive, become CFOs, CEOs, and maybe take our place in state-owned enterprises, maybe go into government, maybe go into the private sector, and maybe find some fulfillment in that life, despite seeing the prophets lose their life for the freedom struggle, despite seeing our grandparents work themselves to death. I personally saw my grandfather, the one who moved from the village, work himself to death. He died as a worker. He died in office. He never got to enjoy the fruits of his labor. And even me, being his grandchild, having succeeded him, having been a product of that legacy, a product of that work, a product of that grind, that grit, that hard work, that determination, I haven't, at least, abundantly enjoyed the fruits of his labor. And it's almost like we've passed down this blue collar workmanship, which is unfortunate because I think there is more to life than work. There is more to life than capital. There is more to life than capture. I think we ought to live life on tenets that are more sustainable. Peace, love, harmony. These are basic tenets that uphold most religions, that uphold most faiths. And even with those characters, I believe that those heroes came about to bring a new level of consciousness, to bring a new sect of society that was oriented of sustainable fields of progress. There will never be enough peace, there'll never be enough love, there'll never be enough harmony in the world. And pursuing those things, I think, purposefully will allow for you to taste happiness, genuine happiness, sustainable happiness, and you feel a sense of fulfillment. And so, again, I speak about this crossroads, I speak about this clash, I speak about this conflict because do I want to be rich? Yes. Do I want to have fast cars? Yes. Do I want to have the women? Sure. Do I want to have the praise? Sure. Do I want to have the accolades? Sure. Do I want to have the fame? Sure. But do I also want to feed my spirit? Yes. Do I also want to indulge in soul food? Yes. Do I also want to impact the lives of those sustainably beyond material means? Of course. Do I also want to strive towards inhabiting the immaterial world and aligning myself with that area of awakenness? Absolutely. So then how does one negotiate between those worlds. And that's ultimately where our culture has led us. And we have these subcultures of drinking, subcultures of smoking, subcultures of soothing ourselves because of this cognitive dissonance, because we know, at least in large part, a lot of us, that as a psychographic, the kids here, the kids in Malaysia, the kids in Europe, the kids in America, we all want the same thing. We are in the year of the artist, and we've all rejected the systems that were brought upon us by our great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents. But the society is governed by these systems, so it's difficult. So it's either you choose to live and die by the system, in that you just plug in and you do your due diligence and you serve your time, or you reject it wholeheartedly and you live as a sangoma, or you live as a yoga teacher, you live as a tantric sex advisor, you live as those guys with tattoos and man buns who are so outworldly, or should I say otherworldly, and you live a life which isn't sustained by profit, but is sustained by purpose, and won't be a rich life as far as resources, as materials, but you may have rich relationships. You may have that fulfillment. You may have just enough to scrape by. You may have do-gooders and people of goodwill who care enough about you to be that good Samaritan to help you along the road. Maybe. Maybe you live as a teacher on the move. Maybe you teach in disaffected communities. Maybe you move around the world sharing your story, inspiring others to live similarly. Maybe. But yeah, I think we ought to tell the truth more. I think we ought to live in our truth more. I think we ought to examine our beliefs. I think that as a culture, if you believe, or at least as a participant in a culture, if you believe everything within that culture, then you don't have your own set of beliefs. If you believe everything that everyone says, then not only are you malleable, but you are gullible. I think we ought to be more self-determinant. Part of my problem with the culture as it's currently set is that, first of all, I don't think people were liberated spiritually. I don't think they were liberated mentally. And I think they brought an oppressed mind to a freedom construct. And that's why, I talk about wanting to be free, financially free, burden free. I want to be free from all restraint. I want to be free from authority. I don't really want to have some middle-aged man telling me what to do. And then when I don't, he'll find someone similarly aged, similarly skilled to me within a week's notice. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in accumulating capital to then be told there are higher echelons to which I can strive towards. But in striving towards them, I will lose value in my family setting. I won't be able to attend fixtures. I won't be able to attend recitals. I won't be able to see my child grow into a blessing for society. I won't be able to see them actualize their gifts from God. I don't want that. What if I want to be a stay-at-home? What if I want to work from home? What if I want to accumulate capital, consciousness, and Christ with my home environment? And COVID has shown us otherwise. COVID has shown that there are alternative pathways to life, and perhaps we ought to explore them. Being in the age of the artist, the age of Aquarius, the age of awakening, the age of whatever you want to call it, I think it does call for us to be more open, be more truthful, be more honest about who we are, what we believe, what we want, and what we expect from people. Because I think so many of us are following a script which we never consented to having been written. We follow structures, cultures, and instructions which don't have our best interests in mind, which don't carry out our best intentions. It's very unfortunate. So, yeah, some food for thought. Cultured Khun. Hope you all have a good day. Cheers.